There comes a moment each day when the night surrenders to something greater than itself, when the darkness, thick and heavy with yesterday's troubles, begins to thin and crack, allowing threads of gold to slip through like hope for furors to be contained. This is not just daybreak, beloved ones. This is the daily miracle of possibility being born again. I have lived long enough to know that how we meet the morning determines how the morning meets us. Every single day, before the world begins its rush and clamor, before the phones ring and the demands pile high, there exists a sacred pause, a holy hush when creation itself seems to hold its breath, waiting to see what we will do with this fresh canvas of time. You see, morning is not just about the sun rising in the sky. Morning is about the sun rising in you. When you open your eyes after sleep, you are not the same person who closed them the night before. Sleep has worked its quiet magic. Cells have renewed themselves, dreams have whispered their secrets, and somewhere in that mysterious space between night and day, you have been given another chance to become who you are meant to be. But here's what I have learned through years of watching mornings come and go. Most people wake up, but they never truly awaken. They stumble from bed to bathroom to kitchen, moving through the motions of morning like sleepwalkers in their own lives. They rush past the miracle happening right in front of them, missing the daily invitation to transformation that comes with every sunrise. The morning hours are sacred because they belong to us before they belong to anyone else. Before the boss calls, before the children need us, before the world stakes its claim on our energy and attention, there is this precious time when we can choose who we want to be for the next 24 hours. This is when we can feed our souls before we feed our obligations. This is when we can remember our purpose before we lose ourselves in our problems. When we honor the morning with devotion, when we meet the dawn with intention instead of rushing past it with distraction, something profound begins to shift in the very fabric of our lives. The day becomes not something that happens to us, but something we participate in creating. And that, beloved ones, changes everything. Every morning, we are given the gift of rebirth, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. When we rise from our beds, we are rising from a kind of death, emerging from hours of unconsciousness into the light of awareness. This is why ancient peoples understood morning as sacred time. They knew what we have forgotten in our hurried modern lives, that the act of rising is itself a resurrection. But there is a difference between simply getting up and truly rising. Getting up is what the alarm clock forces us to do. Rising is what we choose to do with our hearts and minds and spirits. Getting up is mechanical. Rising is magical. Getting up happens to our bodies. Rising happens to our souls. I remember years ago I used to leap from bed at the first sound of the alarm, immediately rushing into the day like a warrior charging into battle. My feet would hit the floor running, my mind already racing through the endless list of things to do. I thought I was being productive. I thought I was seizing the day. What I was really doing was abandoning myself before I had even said good morning to my own spirit. Then life taught me, as life has a way of teaching us all, that the first moments of morning are not meant to be conquered, but to be received. They are not meant to be rushed through, but to be savored. Those precious minutes between sleeping and fully waking are when we can choose how we want to meet the world, instead of letting the world choose how it wants to meet us. Now I rise differently. I wake not to the harsh demand of an alarm, but to the gentle invitation of light creeping through my window. I sit on the edge of my bed for just a moment, feeling my feet on the floor, feeling the air in my lungs, feeling the quiet miracle of being alive for another day. I say good morning to myself before I say good morning to anyone else. I check in with my heart before I check my messages. This simple shift, this sacred pause between unconscious and conscious has changed not just my mornings, but my entire existence, because how we begin anything is how we do everything. When we start our days with intention instead of reaction, with presence instead of panic, We set a tone that echoes through every hour that follows. If I could teach the world one thing about morning devotion, it would be this. Always begin with thank you. Before you ask for anything, before you worry about anything, before you plan anything, say thank you. Thank you for the breath in your lungs. Thank you for the bed that held you through the night. Thank you for eyes that open to see another day. Thank you for the gift of being alive in this moment, right here, right now. You see, gratitude is not just good manners toward the universe. Gratitude is the foundation upon which all other blessings are built. When we start our day by acknowledging what we already have, we create space for more goodness to flow into our lives. When we begin with complaints and worries, we create space for more problems to multiply. The heart that starts the morning with gratitude is a heart that stays open to miracles all day long. I learned this truth from watching my grandmother, who had every reason to be bitter but chose to be grateful instead. She would wake each morning, and before her feet touched the floor, she would whisper, "Thank you, Lord, for letting me see another day." She had buried children, survived poverty, faced discrimination that would break most people's hearts. Yet every morning her first words were, "Thank you." That woman lived to be 93 years old, and I never once heard her complain about waking up tired. She knew something that took me years to understand. Gratitude doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. Gratitude creates them. There's a woman I know who transformed her entire family through morning gratitude. She was going through a difficult time, struggling with depression, feeling like nothing in her life was working. Someone suggested she start each day by writing down 3 things she was grateful for. She thought it was silly, but she was desperate enough to try anything. The first morning, she struggled to find even 3 things. By the end of the first week, she was finding 5, then 10, then 20, but something even more beautiful happened. Her children started noticing their mother's changed energy. Her husband began asking what was different about her. Her co-workers commented on her smile. Gratitude had changed not just her inner world, but her outer world too. This is the ripple effect of a grateful heart. When we choose to see our blessings, we become a blessing to others. When we start our day counting our gifts instead of our grievances, we become a gift to everyone we meet. Gratitude is contagious in the most beautiful way. It spreads from heart to heart, from home to home, from community to community. After gratitude comes the harder work, the work that requires more courage than most people are willing to give. After we have said thank you for what is good, we must also say goodbye to what is heavy. Mourning is when we must practice the sacred art of letting go. Mourning is when we must choose forgiveness over resentment, release over revenge, peace over pain. Every sunrise brings with it the opportunity for fresh forgiveness. The light that breaks through the darkness is not just illuminating the world around us, it is illuminating the grudges we carry, the anger we nurse, the bitterness we feed. And in that light, we have a choice. We can hold on to yesterday's hurts, or we can release them into the healing power of a new day. But here is what I have learned about forgiveness in all my years of living. We must begin with ourselves. Before we can forgive anyone else, we must forgive the person we see in the mirror. We must release ourselves from the prison of past mistakes, failed attempts, and imperfect choices. We must stop carrying yesterday's shame into today's possibilities. Too many people wake up each morning and immediately begin the familiar ritual of self-punishment. They rehearse their failures, replay their embarrassments, and remind themselves of all the ways they are not enough. This is not morning devotion. This is morning destruction. When we start the day by attacking ourselves, we set the tone for a day of defeat before we even get dressed. I spent years carrying the weight of things I could not change, mistakes I had made, words I could not take back. Every morning I would wake up and immediately feel the familiar heaviness settling on my chest like a stone. I thought this was normal. I thought this was just the price of being human. I did not realize I was choosing to carry burdens that were never meant to be carried into a new day. The morning I decided to practice forgiveness changed everything. Not just my relationship with others, but my relationship with myself. I began each day by speaking words of release. I forgive myself for yesterday's mistakes. I forgive others for their imperfections. I release what I cannot control. I receive the gift of starting fresh. These simple words spoken in the quiet of morning began to heal wounds that had festered for years. When we carry yesterday's burdens into today's opportunities, we poison our present with our past. We become like people trying to run a race while dragging heavy chains. We exhaust ourselves before we even begin. But when we choose forgiveness as our morning practice, we free ourselves to move lightly through the day. We create space for new relationships, new possibilities, new joy. Forgiveness in the morning light is not about pretending hurt never happened. It is about futures to let hurt happen again in our hearts. It is about choosing freedom over bondage, healing over hatred, hope over hopelessness. Once we have cleared our hearts with gratitude and forgiveness, we create space for something beautiful to enter. We create space for intention. But let me tell you the difference between setting goals and setting intentions, because too many people confuse the two and wonder why their mornings feel empty despite all their planning. Goals are about what we want to get. Contentions are about who we want to become. Goals focus on the destination, contentions focus on the character we develop along the way. Goals ask, what do I want to achieve today? Contentions ask, how do I want to show up in the world today? Both have their place, but intentions must come first, because how we are determines what we accomplish. Far more than what we accomplish determines who we are. When we set intentions in the quiet of morning, we are having a conversation with our highest self. We are asking the part of us that knows our deepest purpose to guide the part of us that will face the day's challenges. We are aligning our daily actions with our eternal values. This is not just planning. This is praying with our whole lives. I have learned to ask myself certain questions each morning as I set my intentions. How do I want to love today? How do I want to serve today? How do I want to grow today? How do I want to respond when things don't go as planned? These questions shift my focus from what the day might do to me to what I might do with the day. There's power in speaking our intentions out loud, in giving voice to the dreams that live quietly in our hearts. When we speak our intentions into the morning air, we are not just making wishes. We are making declarations. We are telling the universe, and more importantly, we are telling ourselves what we stand for and what we are moving toward. I knew a young woman who started each morning by saying, "Today I choose to see the good in people, even when it's hard to find." She had been hurt deeply and found herself becoming cynical, suspicious, closed off from others. But every morning she would speak this intention even when she didn't feel it, even when she didn't believe it. Slowly over time, her heart began to soften. Her relationships began to heal. Her life began to change. Not because the world became perfect, but because she became intentional about how she wanted to move through an imperfect world. Creating space for divine guidance in our daily plans means leaving room for mystery, for surprise, for the unexpected gift that comes when we align our will with a wisdom greater than our own. It means holding our plans lightly, with open hands, ready to receive whatever blessings the day might bring. After we have set our intentions, we must quiet ourselves long enough to listen for the response. This is where prayer and meditation become the bridge between our human desires and divine wisdom. Prayer is not just asking for things. Prayer is opening our hearts to receive what we truly need. Meditation is not emptying our minds. Meditation is filling our spirits with the peace that comes from remembering we are not walking through this life alone. I have prayed in many ways over the years. Sometimes prayer has been desperate crying out in the middle of the night. Sometimes prayer has been quiet whispers of gratitude as I watch the sunrise. Sometimes prayer has been wordless sitting in the presence of something greater than myself. All of these are valid. All of these are heard. All of these matter. But morning prayer is different from crisis prayer. Morning prayer is not born out of desperation, but out of devotion. It is not emergency communication, but daily communion. When we pray in the morning, we are not trying to fix something that is broken. We are nurturing something that is growing. We are tending the garden of our relationship with the divine. Meditation, I have learned, is the other half of prayer. If prayer is speaking, meditation is listening. If prayer is reaching up, meditation is receiving down. Too often we treat our spiritual practice like a one-answer conversation, doing all the talking and none of the listening. We pour out our requests and complaints and worries, then jump up from our knees and rush into the day without waiting for an answer. But the divine speaks to us most clearly in the silence, in the space between our thoughts, in the pause between our heartbeats, in the stillness that comes when we stop trying to manage and control and fix everything ourselves. This is why the morning quiet is so precious. It is not empty time, it is listening time. I remember the first time I truly experienced the power of morning silence. I had been struggling with a decision that felt impossible. I had analyzed it from every angle, sought advice from everyone I trusted, made lists of pros and cons until my mind was spinning. Finally, one morning I sat quietly without saying anything at all. I just sat and breathed and waited. And in that silence, I heard something I had been too busy to notice before. Not a voice from outside, but a knowing from within. A clarity that came not from thinking harder, but from thinking less. Silence teaches us what noise cannot. It teaches us that we are held, that we are loved, that we are guided, even when we cannot see the path ahead. It teaches us that our worth is not dependent on our productivity. Our value is not measured by our achievements. Our significance is not earned by our performance. Morning spiritual practice connects us to the source of all strength, all wisdom, all peace. It reminds us that we are not just physical beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings learning to live in physical form. Just as we would never think of starting our day without feeding our bodies, we must not start our day without feeding our souls. And one of the most powerful ways to nourish our inner selves is through the careful, intentional reading of words that lift us higher, that remind us of who we are and who we can become. The mind is like rich soil. Whatever seeds we plant there in the morning will grow throughout the day. If we fill our minds with wisdom, beauty, truth, and hope, these qualities will bloom in our thoughts, our words, our actions. If we fill our minds with gossip, complaints, fear, and negativity, these too will multiply and spread through every hour that follows. This is why I have always been careful about what I read in the morning. Not the news first thing, with its parade of problems and disasters. Not social media, with its endless comparisons and distractions, but words that have been tested by time. Words that have lifted countless hearts. Words that connect us to the best of human wisdom and divine truth. I keep certain books by my bedside, books I return to again and again like old friends who never fail to offer comfort and guidance. Poetry that reminds me of the beauty in ordinary moments, spiritual writings that connect me to something larger than my immediate concerns, stories of people who faced impossible circumstances and found ways to triumph, not through force or cleverness, but through faith and perseverance. Reading in the morning is different from reading at any other time of day. Our minds are fresh, our hearts are open, our spirits are receptive. We are not yet carrying the weight of the day's concerns or the fatigue of the day's battles. We can receive truth more fully, let wisdom sink deeper, allow inspiration to take root in the fertile ground of a rested soul. I knew a man who struggled with anger, who found himself losing his temper over small things, who felt like he was becoming someone he didn't want to be. Someone suggested he spend 10 minutes each morning reading something uplifting before he checked his phone or turned on the television. He chose to read one page of inspiring quotes each day. Within a month, his wife noticed the change. Within 3 months, his co-workers were commenting on his patience. Reading had literally changed his thinking, and changing his thinking had changed his living. What we consume in the morning becomes the lens through which we see the entire day. Choose wisely, beloved ones. Feed your soul the best food you can find. Our bodies are not separate from our spirits. They are not obstacles to overcome or burdens to carry, but temples to honor and gifts to celebrate. When we move our bodies in the morning, we are not just exercising muscles and joints. We are expressing gratitude for the miracle of physical life. We are saying thank you with our whole being for the gift of breath, blood, bone, and heart. Too many people think of morning exercise as punishment for eating too much or as preparation for eating again. But movement in the morning is worship. It is celebration. It is joy made visible through the dance of life flowing through us. When we stretch our arms toward the sky, we are reaching toward heaven. When we bend and twist and turn, we are honoring the flexibility and strength that allow us to navigate this world. When we walk or run or move in any way, we are participating in the rhythm of creation itself. I have never been an athlete, but I have always been a mover. Even as a young girl, I understood that my body wanted to express the music it heard, the feelings it felt, the life it contained. In the morning, before the day makes its demands, I give my body a chance to remember its own song. Sometimes it is gentle stretching, reaching and bending like a flower, turning toward the sun. Sometimes it is walking, feeling my feet connect with the earth, feeling the air fill my lungs, feeling my heart pump life to every cell. The connection between physical vitality and spiritual energy is undeniable. When we honor our bodies, our souls feel more at peace. When we move with intention, our minds become clearer. When we breathe deeply, our spirits expand. This is not about becoming perfect physical specimens. This is about treating our bodies as the sacred vessels they are. Simple movements can be profound prayers. Lifting our arms can be an offering of praise. Rolling our shoulders can be a release of tension and worry. Taking deep breaths can be an act of receiving the gift of life itself. Walking can be meditation in motion, each step a reminder that we are moving forward, that we are alive, that we are blessed to inhabit these miraculous bodies. When we start our day by honoring our physical selves, we set the tone for treating ourselves with respect and care all day long. We remember that we are not just minds thinking thoughts, but whole beings deserving of love and attention. After we have nourished our souls, connected with the divine, and honored our bodies, we must turn our attention to the practical matter of organizing our day. But this is not ordinary planning. This is planning with faith. This is organizing our hours in partnership with a wisdom greater than our own. This is making our schedules not just efficient, but sacred. Most people plan their days like generals preparing for war, trying to anticipate every possible obstacle, control every variable, manage every outcome. They fill their calendars so full there is no room for breath, let alone miracles. They schedule their lives so tightly that when unexpected blessings try to enter, there is no space to receive them. But planning with faith is different. It means making a framework for the day while leaving room for mystery. It means organizing our priorities while staying open to divine directions. It means preparing for what we can control while surrendering what we cannot. It means inviting God into our calendars, not just our prayers. When I plan my day in the morning, I start by asking not just what needs to be done, but what wants to be expressed through me. Not just where I need to go, but where I am being called to serve. Not just what I want to accomplish, but what I am willing to receive. This simple shift changes everything about how I move through my hours. I learned this truth from watching a friend who always seemed to have perfect timing. She would show up exactly when people needed her, call at precisely the right moment, arrive just as opportunities were opening. When I asked her secret, she smiled and said, "I plan my day every morning, but I hold my plans loosely. I ask to be placed where I'm needed most, then I pay attention to the gentle nudges that redirect my steps. With faith means leaving white space in our schedules for the unexpected, conversation that changes a life, for the detour that leads to a blessing, for the delay that prevents a disaster we never see coming. It means trusting that our days are guided by love, not just logic. When we approach our daily planning as a spiritual practice, something beautiful happens. The chaos that comes from poor planning gives way to the peace that comes from faithful preparation. We still accomplish what needs to be done, but we do it with grace instead of stress, with trust instead of anxiety, with confidence that we are exactly where we need to be. The ultimate purpose of all morning devotion is not to make us feel good about ourselves, but to prepare us to be good for others. Everything we have done in these precious morning hours, every practice we have embraced, every intention we have set leads us to this moment when we ask ourselves the most important question of all: how can I serve today? This is not about grand gestures or heroic acts, though those have their place. This is about beginning each day with our hearts turned outward, our eyes looking for ways to lift others, our hands ready to help. When we start our morning thinking about how we can bless someone else's day, we transform not only their experience, but our own. I have learned that the secret to a fulfilling life is to make it about something bigger than yourself. When we wake up focused only on our own needs, our own goals, our own problems, we make our world very small. But when we wake up asking how we can contribute to the healing, the helping, the hoping that our world so desperately needs, we expand our purpose beyond our personal limitations. This morning preparation for service can begin before we even leave our homes. It can be as simple as choosing to speak words of encouragement to our family members, instead of immediately discussing the day's problems. It can be deciding to really listen when our children talk to us instead of thinking about our to-do lists. It can be calling someone who might be lonely, writing a note of appreciation to someone who serves us, or simply praying for the people we will encounter throughout the day. I knew a woman who decided to transform her morning routine by spending 5 minutes each day thinking about one person she could serve that day. Sometimes it was bringing coffee to a coworker who was struggling. Sometimes it was offering to help a neighbor with their groceries. Sometimes it was simply being fully present with someone who needed to be heard. This small morning practice began to change her entire community. People started noticing her kindness. They began looking for ways to pass it forward. What started as 5 minutes of morning intention became a wave of generosity that touched dozens of lives. When we live for something greater than ourselves, we discover that we become greater than we thought we could be. The joy that comes from serving others is unlike any happiness we can find by serving only ourselves. It is deeper, lasting, multiplying. It connects us to the best parts of humanity and reminds us why we are here. Service is not sacrifice when it flows from a heart prepared by morning devotion. It becomes the natural expression of a soul that has been filled with gratitude, cleansed by forgiveness, guided by intention, and strengthened by connection to the divine. Now I must speak honestly about something we all face, but rarely discuss. The resistance that rises up in us when we try to change our mornings, even when we know these practices will transform our lives. Even when we have experienced their power firsthand, there will be mornings when everything in us rebels against rising early, against sitting quietly, against doing what we know is good for us. This resistance is not a sign of weakness or failure. It is a sign of being human. Part of us always prefers the familiar, even when the familiar is not serving us well. Part of us would rather stay asleep than wake up to the work of transformation. Part of us chooses the comfort of old patterns over the challenge of new possibilities. But here is what I have learned about resistance. It is not our enemy. It is our teacher. When we feel that familiar pull to skip our morning practice, to hit the snooze button one more time, to choose busyness over stillness, we are being given an opportunity to practice the most important skill of all: choosing love over fear, growth over comfort, faith over doubt. The secret to consistency is not perfection, it is compassion. Start small. If 30 minutes of morning devotion feels overwhelming, start with 5. If 5 feels impossible, start with 1 deep breath. And 1 word of gratitude. If reading a whole chapter is too much, read 1 paragraph. If exercising for 20 minutes seems unrealistic, stretch for 2. Small beginnings lead to lasting changes. The woman who starts with 1 minute of silence becomes the woman who transforms 30 minutes of meditation. The man who begins with 1 page of inspirational reading becomes the man who transforms his entire library. The person who starts with 1 gentle stretch becomes the person who dances with joy through their morning routine. There will be setbacks. There will be mornings when you oversleep, when you feel too tired, when life corrupts your plans. This is not failure. This is being human. The measure of your commitment is not whether you never miss a morning, but whether you keep returning to what you know serves your highest good. Be patient with yourself. Lasting change happens slowly, like the sunrise itself. It begins with the smallest hint of light on the horizon and gradually fills the entire sky. Your morning practice will grow the same way, little by little, choice by choice, day by day, until what once felt difficult becomes as natural as breathing. Beloved ones, I want you to imagine with me for a moment what your life could look like 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 5 years from now, if you chose to honor your mornings as sacred time. Picture yourself waking not with dread but with anticipation. Picture yourself moving through your days, not driven by anxiety but guided by peace. Picture yourself facing challenges not from a place of depletion, but from a place of fullness. This is not fantasy. This is the natural result of consistent morning devotion. When we begin each day by filling our souls before emptying our energy, when we start each morning connected to our purpose before we get lost in our problems, when we ground ourselves in gratitude and forgiveness and intention before we face the demands of the world, everything changes. The person who practices morning devotion becomes a different kind of human being. They become someone who responds instead of reacts, who creates instead of merely survives, who gives instead of just takes. They become a source of calm in the midst of chaos, a voice of hope in the midst of despair, a presence of love in a world that desperately needs more love. Your transformed morning will transform your family. Children who see their parents starting the day with intention learn to live with intention. Spouses who witness their partners choosing peace over panic learn to make the same choice. Friends and co-workers who experience your centered presence begin to wonder what makes you different, and some will ask you to share your secret. This is how change spreads, beloved ones, not through preaching or pressure, but through the quiet witness of a life well lived, through the power of example, through the power of example, through the irresistible attraction of authentic peace and joy. So I call you to begin tomorrow morning, not next week when things slow down, not next month when you have more time. Tomorrow, set your alarm 15 minutes earlier. Choose 1 practice that speaks to your heart. Start small, start simple, but start. Your future self is waiting for you in those quiet morning moments. The person you are meant to become is ready to emerge through the daily practice of morning devotion. The life you are created to live is ready to unfold through the power of sacred beginning. May your mornings become a blessing to your own soul and a gift to everyone whose life you touch. May you rise each day knowing that you are loved, you are guided, you are never alone. And may the light that breaks through your personal darkness each morning become a light that helps illuminate the darkness in our world. The sun is ready to rise on your transformed life. Are you ready to meet it?